Our second speaker will be Steve Metze. Stephen Metze is the author of The Zombie Monologues, as well as numerous role-playing games and miniature war game rule books and source books, including Uber RPG Steampunk. He is a member of Metze and the Writers League of Texas. He graduated from West Point and continues to serve with over 26 years of military service, including 10 years as a military journalist. And he also has an MFA in film and video production. He is currently publishing a serial web comic at www.godsoftheether.com, of course, based on his steampunk novel, Gods of the Ether. Please join me in welcoming Steve.
So, thank you for inviting me. Thanks to this awesome bookstore. Thank all of you for coming. Thank you for, I don't know, I should have gone first, I think. In retrospect, that would have been a smarter choice. But, so you've read 3 times. I've read, this will be first. So one of the things, this book pitches really well, and it reads well alone in a room. But my uncle was a psychologist. He was a psychologist. And what kind of got me started is I borrowed one of his transcripts that he did, and it was written in transcript format. And so I wrote this book in transcript format, which looks really cool on the page and reads really quickly, but sounds really funny when you read it out loud, I realized. So I've scoured for parts I can read out loud, because it's basically just name, sentence, name, sentence. There's no he said, she said, looked pensively across the room, none of that. It's just name, what they say now. And I tried reading that to the wife in practice, and it was basically Bob, Lisa, George. And so that didn't work, so I went looking for some other stuff. It does require a little bit of background, so I'm going to give you the pitch of the book, and then I'll read a couple of sections out of it, and then we can do some Q&A. So the pitch is, in the middle of a zombie apocalypse, a psychiatrist figures out that zombies still have their original thoughts and memories, they just can't get to them. So he puts a zombie in a lab, puts a probe in his head, figures out he can talk to him. Once he can talk to him, he's a psychiatrist, he wants them to feel good about their own lives, so he starts doing therapy sessions with them. That kind of works, but he decides in a more social setting, puts a bunch of zombies in a room, puts them all together, and starts zombie group therapy. And you gotta know, zombie group therapy can't possibly end well. And it's all about the apocalypse from the other side of the story. So, to give you a little bit of so that's the background, and what I'm gonna do is, the story starts with each of the zombies kind of introducing themselves. They do kind of a little initial interview with the psychiatrist. They just ask, hey, who are you, what are you doing? And of course, as we go through, we learn about all these different zombies and all their different walks of life. And then they start putting them in a room and they start group therapy. We learn how all the zombies some of them know each other and knew each other in past lives, and how all that plays out. So I'll just start with the first one, which is, if I mention NADS, that stands for necrotizing ambulation disorder, which is what they call the zombie disease. It is also sometimes referred to as Athena's disease, because the quote is, when a world-renowned actress, supermodel, pop singer, anti-poverty activist suddenly transitions to NAD in the middle of the Academy Awards, I think the least we could do was name the plague in her honor. So it's also called Athena's disease, but in this book all the doctors call it NADS. And they call it NAD stage 1, which is being infected, NAD stage 2, which is being a zombie, and then there are 3 and 4, which do not appear in this reading, so you don't need to worry about it. All right, so this first interview is with Tom. Long story short, he's a 17-year-old deceased white male, if I ever, let me see, do I do that? Yeah. If I ever lean over here to say anything, that's the doctor's talking, or the doctor's notes, and over here would be Tom. Okay, I don't think I'm going to go over there too much, but we'll see. All right. I didn't realize what had happened at first. I'd bandaged the bite and poured a whole bottle of rubbing alcohol on it like 2 days before, so I figured I was okay. I mean, it seemed to make sense, and I felt fine. Well, my vision was a little blurry, and the idea of eating vegetables made my stomach churn, but that was it. Me and my girlfriend and some of my other buddies had headed down to join the riots, not because we wanted to be a part of a cause. We didn't even know what started it. We were just hoping to get some loot. I mean, why not? all the stores were going to claim all the damage on their insurance anyway. It was either let it burn or put it to good use. Seemed like an easy choice to me. I guess that makes us criminals, but dude, I think by then everyone had broken one law or another. I know my dad buried a stash of cans of soup and shotgun shells out in the backyard when the food and ammo census came by. And don't think he didn't think about trying to get a free gun out of the deal. In that first pass, they were passing out shotguns and pistols to anybody who held out their hand. Well, except kids, which I never understood. Instead, they gave us classes on symptoms and, get this, how to tell if we needed to shoot our own parents. An unpleasant topic, they said, but something you must be prepared to do. Actually, I guess that does explain why they didn't give us guns. I mean, not right after they gave us permission to take out our own folks. My dad stayed so focused on defending the house, filling sandbags, welding bars up everywhere. I don't even know if he knew I left. It was totally safe, at least in our neighborhood. And I only did it because he made such a big deal about how I shouldn't. Besides, if I let my girlfriend go out alone and something like that with my other friends, she was going to come back to somebody else's girlfriend. Once we all got together, we wandered the streets for a couple of days, camping out in abandoned stores, using clothes for pillows, scrounging food off restaurant shelves and smashed up convenience stores. Early on, we passed through a big crowd, and I came out with a big chunk taken out of my forearm. Didn't see who did it, didn't care. Figured one small wound in exchange for one of those big screen TVs, that was well worth it. Maybe I should have paid more attention to the symptoms. Maybe any of us should have. I just thought I had really bad gas. Now that I think about it, I think my girlfriend knew. I mean, not that I had bad gas, she always knew that. I think she understood it was something worse. She got more and more touch crabby after that. First she didn't want to be kissed, then she didn't want my arm around her. I was totally pissed at first, but at the same time, she said these really sweet things to me, like how she really liked me, how much she liked my smile, the sort of thing you tell someone you aren't ever planning on seeing again, I guess. Then one afternoon I took a nap, and when I woke up, everyone else was gone. I remember it seemed much harder to get up than usual, and for some reason, doorknobs completely confused me. I don't know how much time passed, but I must have spent hours just staring at this one door, absolutely fascinated by it. I still can't recall exactly how the damn thing works, but now whenever I think of one, I get really angry. Like, I just want to stand and stare at it angry. That kind of angry. There were some sounds then, I guess from outside. It seemed like I needed to head towards them, so I did. Eventually I did find a door somebody left open and made it out into the street. It was crazy. People were totally freaked out and running and screaming all over the place for some bizarre reason. I gently took one older lady by the wrist to ask her what was so horrifying, but she fainted when her arm came off. I took a few minutes to pop open her forehead, scoop out a few mouthfuls of brains, and then I tried to flag down a policeman. I never found one. So when did you realize? Realize what? We repeated the question and then inserted an image the DMV had on file after we digitally blended it with its present image. Oh, that! Well, it was different than I expected. The whole thing was different. After a while, I started to comprehend that I didn't recognize most of the people I was hanging out with. It was sort of like waiting in a really long line or a crowded concert all the time. You just moved where everyone else moved. And that seemed to make sense. I think the first thing that started to tip me off was when we wandered through some building after some kids who were running from us, probably a game. They were cool little dudes. Then I stumbled and fell into the door of a restroom. It flew open, I lost my balance, and staggered inside. And I remembered that it was a restroom, and I knew I was supposed to do something there. Like, it felt like a really familiar place, but I couldn't figure out what to do. And there was this man, well, most of a man, lying on the floor behind one of the other little doors, and I went over and asked him if he knew. It took me longer than usual to get the words out, but I'm sure I got it right. Nothing. He didn't say anything. Man, that sort of thing is annoying, you know? Finally, I heard that noise again, a distant scream. And then I was craving something to eat like you couldn't imagine. I stood up and saw another guy was in the room with me, looking right into my eyes. I asked him if he knew, and he didn't say anything either. So then I got really angry. Like, I just wanted to stand and stare at him angry. That sort of angry. And I did, for about a week. And you know, a week didn't seem like a long time to be angry. There were no distractions, no movement or loud noises to pull me away. It seemed really peaceful. For angry, I mean. And then I finally noticed that oh, this is really embarrassing. It finally dawned on me that I was looking into a mirror, okay? I had all these, bumps and holes and cuts, and well, there were parts showing that I'm pretty sure weren't supposed to be showing. Oh, I don't mean my dork. I mean, stuff that should be on the inside, not my dork. That wasn't hanging out. My insides were hanging out. So that's what I knew, And that's the end of that one. So that's Tom, the high school student. And of course, each one of them is some weird stereotype that you would see in a book. So I'm going to read one more, and then I'll open it up to questions. This is my favorite character. Her name is Sigourney, who is, there's not a lot of subtlety here. Sigourney is remarkably like Sigourney Weaver in Gorillas from the Mist, if the gorillas were zombies. So this is basically an investigative journalist who disguised herself as a zombie, figured out how to walk among them, and then spent weeks at a time traveling with the hordes, taking notes, learning about them. And then she wrote a memoir called Dead Like Me, which became a #1 bestseller. And then at some point, we learned that, she's a zombie, so at some point something must have gone terribly wrong, and we're trying to figure out what it is throughout most of the book and how she became a zombie. So here's just one section, one part of the interview with Sigourney. And over here again is the doctor, Sigourney. Okay. Even though you don't have a scientific background, you were considered one of the foremost authorities on NAD behavior, even before your research in the field. What's changed since you contracted the disease? Lots of things, really. For one, I'd published all that reanimates crave brain matter as their primary food source. Many of the leading necrologists thought that way too. My unbelievably, incredibly non-scientific article, AlphaZ, described in detail how I had observed that each horde had an inherent leader. I guess that was my bias more than anything else. There just aren't a lot of creatures in the animal kingdom that don't have a leader, unless they are primarily solitary. Reanimates move as a group, tend to want to gather together and move as a mass, ergo, they must have a leader. I looked at movement patterns from satellites for the big picture, and from traffic cameras from urban areas. Please don't ask me how I got either of those things without any kind of budget. Oh hell, I'm dead, who cares anymore? I stole them, I promised fame and fortune, or I got someone on my team to promise sexual favors. No one ever delivered on those, by the way, as far as I know. Anyway, nothing from any of those sources. So when I looked for cues that reanimates would get from each other, we released Nosy back out in the wild. Nosy is a zombie with no nose. They're clever that way, I know. Okay, again, illegally, deal with it. And anyway, we did that to see if there was any difference for a reanimate with no olfactory perception. No difference. Just when I thought it was time to conclude that they had no actual leadership role, I got another idea based on feeding patterns. In any group of more than one reanimate, whenever they fell upon some prey, that's a nice way of saying Mr. Perkins from down the street, inevitably the same reanimate would get the brains, and the others would divide up the rest. The one that got the brains, the good stuff as it were, must naturally be the leader. In the article, I mentioned that this leader was gender non-specific. In fact, it was everything non-specific. A teen girl reanimate of any ethnicity could be just as likely to be in charge as a male bodybuilder of any other ethnicity. From that, I deduced that a leadership role did exist, at least in smaller parties. If it existed there, then even if I hadn't worked out the exact details, I reasoned that it probably also existed on the macro level. And I was totally wrong. How so? Different tastes, that's it. Some just like the taste of other organs better. Then why go to all the trouble for an organ so well protected? Oh, it's not that well protected, believe me. Do you prefer brains? Are you offering? We can just stick with the main question. Believe it or not, it's the more intelligent or more socially responsible reanimate that goes for the brain. Go on. Well, think about it. If you scoop out the head, no new reanimates running around. Safe slaughter, as it were. Well, isn't it? So you view this as a favor? More of a service, actually. How very socially responsible of you. Thank you. And that ends that section. So I'll stop there and go ahead and open it up for questions, if you have any questions. I didn't pre-print any questions.
We'll do that next time.
But yes, next time I will, yes.
So you mentioned that some of the zombies knew each other in their past
Yes.
lives. Were any of them romantically involved?
There is a married couple.
Aww.
They are traveling comedians, Sam and Janice, and they're married, and they have a traveling comedian show where they do zombie jokes. That's their whole shtick. And at one point they got infected, and they travel together. And at one point in the book, they go through zombies couples therapy because they are starting to have different tastes. And you know, when one person of the couple's body changes, it can be very traumatic for both of them. And she lost an arm, and so he didn't want her hanging around anymore. It's very traumatic. So, but they do go through zombies couples therapy, and they end up, you know, embracing each other more. Well, sort of. They're all strapped to tables. They don't actually see. That's another. This will never make a movie because none of the zombies move. They're all just strapped to tables with probes in their heads. So, not a lot of verbs. I don't do verbs in this book. Just dialogue. Yes.
I guess aside from, popular zombie culture, what else influenced you as far as the writing of this book and the tone it set?
Well, so one day, one of my friends, I don't exactly know what inspired it, sent an email that said something to the tune of "Zombie walks into a psychiatrist's office." And we started making jokes off that for like 6 straight months of just passing back "Zombie walks into a psychiatrist" jokes. And I was keeping them all, and I was laughing maniacally, and I decided that I would write them all down and give all these zombies personalities and really go through the process of, you know, if I were just riding along in a zombie body watching what my zombie hands and zombie teeth were doing, how would that affect me as a person? And so and then and each character is kind of based on a different take on, it's like some of them, there's a Zactivist, which is a zombie activist. He's who's a zombie, and he's in denial that he's a zombie. He doesn't. In fact, he gets very angry at the others for calling him a zombie until they eventually prove to him that he is. And then there's a corporate executive, of course, who embraces his inner zombie and is very excited that he's immortal now. So you've got the whole spectrum of zombies, because why wouldn't you? Yes?
Are there disabled zombies?
Disabled zombies. There's one zombie without an arm. There's another zombie without 2 arms. There's a couple of blind zombies. That's as far as it goes, though. I don't think there are any. I mean, they mention other types of zombies, but none of the 10 that are strapped to the tables, except for not having arms. Yes?
You have an MFA, right?
I do.
So I can totally see this as a movie. Have you thought about, you know, trying to write a script and putting something together?
I have.
Flashbacks and things like that.
I have, and I think it would be fun to do, and I haven't completely ruled it out.
You shouldn't.
And there are some action scenes. At some point, you know, they start to learn. There's a mystery to be solved, because why wouldn't there be? And as they learn things, you know, the zombies give them, you know, at least some of them know some things that make the humans kind of curious, and so they go out and they do some exploring. So there's some see the doctors do things kind of moments. So it's not entirely in the lab. So let's see. Yes?
Who was your first zombie?
Who's my first what?
Zombie.
Who's the first one I wrote, or who's the first one that shows up in the book?
The first one you wrote.
Sigourney was probably the first one I wrote. The idea of someone disguising themselves, and she goes through this elaborate, well, she goes through about 5 interns trying to experiment with what you have to do to hang out with zombies and not get eaten. So, but then once she figures it out, then she's good after that. But she was by far she was probably the first. The next one was Ricky, who's the corporate executive, because I'm a corporate lackey and executives make me angry. So that was a way to take out all my inner rage. In fact, he physically looks exactly like the vice president in Austin, who I'm betting all kinds of money will never read this book. So, yeah. I might have even used what